We're third. This is Molly Ruland, your host. I'm excited to be recording this podcast from Boston, Massachusetts, hanging out with some friends for a couple weeks, catching up with family members. But wanted to get this podcast in. I'm really excited about the guest today. Chris Krimitsos is the founder of Podfest Expo. He just set out to break a Guinness World Record, and as far as I'm concerned, he nailed it. But we'll get that announcement soon. Just really impressed with Chris because he's been doing a lot of stuff in the podcast industry, but he does it with heart, and he always brings people together. And it's really, really impressive to see how much care for the community is involved in everything that he does. So I'm excited for you all to meet him today as well. So what's up, Chris? Welcome to the lower third. How are you today?
Molly, I love it. Now lower third? How'd you get the name? Is it just the lower third? Because I know lower third from TV production. You always had to have your lower thirds ready.
Exactly. Well, it's kind of a play on words. It's a little, post-production humor, I suppose. But, when you're looking at the chakras, the lower third chakra, which is the yellow chakra, is all about personal responsibility, right? And the thing that I love about people like you is it's like, there's something in there. There's a fire that got lit, right? And like, it's just who you are. And you're going to constantly bring people together, no matter pandemic or not. And that's like in your core, right? Like that's not something that can be taught. That's personal responsibility. And so that's the basis of everybody that I talk to on this show is just kind of finding out like, what drives you, what keeps you going, especially during a pandemic, right? Because like things aren't easy right now and it looks different for everybody and people are adapting in different ways. And so, yeah, man, drive, determination, all that stuff.
You said something that's interesting. People would always ask me like, how do you do what you do? Like, because I connect people, I bring people together, and I'm like, well, that's easy. You just do this or that. Then you realize not everybody has the same, like everybody has different things. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it was a big fat Greek family, my neighbor was a firefighter and he would help people like for fun. And I would be attached to his hip as we went on like Slurpee runs. And if someone had a flat tire, he would do it. I have a feeling like between those two confluences, I got to model that behavior from a young age and it was like baked into my DNA. So it's like, I don't know how to not help someone if they need help. Like, I don't even understand what that's like, but it's been a really beneficial thing to have for what I do, which is bringing communities of people together.
Well, you have a really great way of making everybody feel comfortable, like whether they're like an expert or they're a newbie or whatever, like everybody feels like they're welcome there and they're a part of the program. And, one thing that really took me aback, the last social activity I had was actually Podfest Expo in March. That was like my last brush with other people since the pandemic. And the gratitude ceremony at the end, I mean, I just sat in that room and I just like cried. I just like, was like working and then I'd look up and listen and like cry a little bit. I mean, it was just really like, how many people, 100 people lined up to just share their story of
We were trying to
gratitude.
figure out, and love your producer hat after this interview, trying to figure out how to like package it because everybody comes up and the stories are so amazing. You can't really play them off. It's like one after another is amazing. It was over an hour and a half of just
Yeah.
people telling us how grateful they are. It's a really amazing thing.
It kept going. I actually live streamed it for quite a while just because I felt like people needed to hear some positive stuff, right? Like people didn't even really understand the context, but they were like, this is so cool. I'm like, yeah, man. And for a lot of people, that's the first time they're getting on stage. It's a big deal, right? Like, so it's just,
Yeah,
it's,
that's the craziest part. What you just said. Like I remember a year ago, 2 years ago, we had one young lady. She had been through a lot of trauma. We didn't know that, and she couldn't be around people because of the trauma. And she got up on stage and told us how grateful she was. And as she was doing that, she's like, I've never publicly spoken in my life ever. And I just got over this trauma. And she started opening up, and it was like everybody was tearing up, because you just don't know what that means to the individual from stepping on stage on top of the gratitude. So it's a very special thing. And that's our closing keynote is the audience.
it's so cool, man. It's like honestly the coolest thing ever. And shout out to you, man. Like kudos. That was a really well produced event. I mean, I spent 20 years producing events and being around that stuff. And like, man, it looked good, it felt good, it worked good, everything was where it needed to be. Everybody was open, there was always resources, there was always coffee. You know what I mean? Like it was just like impeccably run. I really can't say enough. especially that one big room. I mean, I loved all your staging and all the, graphic displays. I mean, it was really like that was clean, man. You killed it. You killed it.
Yeah, we lucked out too because the chandeliers in that room are the same blue that our Podfest colors are.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even like we couldn't even put it on a setting because some chandeliers have lights. That one wasn't. It was that color, and that was our brand color. So it was like the whole room, like it was not only was the LED display, but it matched the chandelier. So it was like over the top. It was
It
pretty amazing how everything lined up.
Yeah, I mean, I walked in, I was like, okay, Chris, okay, like this is super lit, you know? It was a great like not festival, but conference. So tell everybody a little bit about that. So how many years have you done Podfest Expo? That was number 4, number
Well, the seed no, the seeds were planted in 2013 through a meetup. We did 2 workshops in 2014, so it wasn't quite a conference. But those seeds were planted, and then 2015 was the first one. So I think it was 6 years because you have to count
Wow.
each 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, 6, and next year will be 7. And we'll hold the record. Fortunately, unfortunately, it was just kind of we had a stroke of luck. We'll be the only conference to go on like continuously live because we'll be able to make it back next year live. We're just going to push the dates back a little bit.
Yeah, I was curious about that. I saw in the email there speaker openings just popped up. So you're going to do virtual next year? Is that the game plan?
No, no, we're going to do live. We're just pushing back the live date
Oh,
later on in the year. We're doing a virtual event right now, a masterclass. So basically, the best of the best. We did Podfest Global, which was the Guinness record-setting attempt. We that one had 320 speakers. Now we're just doing a mini. What we're calling, we're getting the band back together. Like we miss everybody, so we're
yeah.
gonna just do a mini, like let's all get together. There's one thing I learned, Molly, and I really appreciated testing with the Global Summit is having something free is really important. So we're going to have a
Mm,
free thing every day with this next conference, just to include everybody that wants to attend and not put a barrier in front of them. The only barrier is they have to have internet. And if they have internet, we'll have access for them, and we'll have something for everybody every day. It's a great way for us to meet great people, a great way for our community to provide value and raise them up as they go through their content creation journey. So it's really important to me to have access to people that and we're actually playing with the actual live physical show to have a virtual conference track that people all over the world could access for like I don't know, like $5, like something so brain dead simple. And if there's any financial barriers, we'll open it up so that way people around the world. Because I mean, you saw this with Global, but we had people in like Nairobi, Africa,
mhm.
India, and they were like, "Wow, we would have never had this." And we were doing ads in like Bangladesh. Like we made sure the poorest parts of the world had access to our ads, so then they could join us for free. And the feedback we got was amazing. We had over 46 countries represented, and people were like, we
Damn.
would never have access to this in where we live. And like, you brought it to us.
Right.
So we want to do more of that. And then I'm hoping to follow your footsteps because you do so much for so many different people. But we're hoping to create a seed fund so we could give someone in like Kenya or Nairobi saying, how much do you need to do an event? And they might say $1,000 US. To us, $1,000 is not a lot. To them, it's like, you just gave a $20,000 check to bring everybody together. So we want to create a seed fund so then we could say, hey, no strings attached. All we ask is send us a picture of everybody that you put on the event, put a shout out for the Podfest community, but then they could, without having to worry about qualifications, I got to hit this mark or go book the venue. It'll be like no strings attached. It's up to them to succeed. So that's one of my passion projects coming up. So I'm hoping next year we'll be able to bring enough people from North America and other parts of the world that are willing to pay that we'll have enough money to create this seed fund to help people in all parts of the world.
That's awesome. I love that. You're always like thinking of new ways, and that's super cool. Yeah, I think accessibility is such a big thing, right? Because and it's not even like financial barriers. Sometimes it's physical barriers, right? Like if you're in a wheelchair or you need assistance, like traveling to these events is really difficult, you know? So I love the idea of having like a virtual option as well, because it's about getting the information into the right hands. And there's so many people, I think a lot of times people say, oh, we're giving people a voice. Like everybody has a voice. We're giving them a platform, like let's not diminish like this person's true strength. Like we're just giving them a platform. We're showing them how to do it, right? Like if we can just, teach content creators how to be seen and heard, right? Especially good people, then we can drown out some of the stuff that's not so great, right?
That's a great distinction. They already have a voice. We're giving them a platform. I love that.
Yeah, because it's a little belittling to say like we're giving them a voice. Like, no, man, you're
It's
not
like they
like,
had a voice before you showed up. Yeah.
yeah, man, you're just amplifying it for them, showing them how to get that done. So, where did your original love for how did the podcasting and then throwing these events like converge in your world? What were you doing before that?
So it's going to sound really unique, but I used to watch TV in New York. I grew up in New York, and WPIX, I think it was channel 11. Everything in New York was very programmed the same. So like channel 2 was CBS, channel 4 was NBC, channel 7 was ABC. Like nothing changed for a long time. And I remember watching the channel as a kid and saying I could do a better job programming these channels than these people. Like I just was like, oh, this movie should be at this time. Like weird stuff. Like not even. I was just a kid. I was like, I could do a better job programming this. So I don't know why, but that seed of I enjoy programming stuff, like content. So that was planted as a child, just looking at the TV, saying they're getting it all messed up on what goes where for different people. I don't know why I thought that, but I just remember thinking that clearly. And then I love future. So when the internet came out, I love like the future. I love that what the internet was going to do for us. So in the 90s, early 90s, and you had dial up, and then everybody would have 10 AOL discs shipped to their house. I couldn't wait to get home and go on the internet and type in a site that was in Greece, and literally it would just have like Greek music playing and a picture of a town. I was like so excited. I was like, oh my God, I just traveled to Greece from my house. So at the time, I didn't know how I was going to make money with it, if that makes sense. I just knew it was really cool and that it was an amazing thing. And then I always liked future technologies. So in my 20s, I kind of was lost in what do I want to do, and I focused on money. So I never got anywhere because I was focused on the wrong things. In my late 20s, I took 6 months off, and I literally just like asked myself, what do you want to do with your life? Very intentional, and the thing that I came up with is I really love helping people, which I think a lot of people come up with that. But then I asked myself, in what avenues and what form can you help people? And I realized I could match make really well. So I was a very good connector. So I understood I had that skill. Then I wanted a community, and I'm an entrepreneur. And what I realized is there's a lot of entrepreneur groups, but a lot of them start when an entrepreneur hits $1 million in revenue. There was nothing for the little guy that's just starting, making
Mm-hmm.
40, 50 grand to 100,000 a year. They're not even considered like a startup by some of these standards. It's weird. So I was like, there's nothing helping people like all these different business owners that are in my position. And I started a community. That community grew to over 300 active members. We literally would do 150 events a year. So I've done over 2,000 events through that community. But during that time, before I started that community, I used to produce 2 TV shows on public access. I love production, technical directing, all that stuff. Like I had 2 shows. And during the time of Tampa Bay Business Owners, I basically found podcasting and I loved the growth of it. And I said, you know what, let me do a conference. And what I promised myself, Molly, is I said, I will let this grow wherever it wants to grow, and I will not be the one that stops it from growing. What that means is I had to learn a lot to get to where you saw me. Every year there's like a major mistake I didn't know about. Like one is in the beginning, I didn't believe in spending in signage because I didn't want to spend money. I wanted to make money. So in events, you have to look good. Like it's like
Yeah.
a cardinal rule, but I didn't understand how cardinal of a rule that was. So, I would just go cheap or I'd find the cheap hotel. But each year I would learn. Someone like you would say, hey, dude, you might want to consider doing this next year. And I'm like, why? Trust me. And these are good people. So I would listen to them to where we are now in Orlando. And it's grown into quite a bit of thing. But I love community building. So I've done this since I was late 20s. So I have a knack for it. And I've done thousands of, I'm talking about like, I'm the kind of guy that would host 5 different meetups a week in 5 different parts of Tampa Bay. And if one person showed up, I was excited. So like what people don't realize, they see like there's like thousands now. I was excited when there was 2 people in front of me, and I went through the paces because I was excited that someone showed up for something I had now. Luckily for me, that one person brought a friend, and these meetups became 20 to 50 people on a weekly basis. So it was amazing. But this is something I love to do, and it's I'm very intentional about it. I think about it. I think about, okay, if Molly shows up, how can I create value for Molly and her sphere of influence, and how could we then combine this one sphere of influence with the other sphere, and how could we connect everybody so we could be one big family. There's differences in the family, but hopefully we could all get along and help each other and help the different components within that family.
For sure. I love that. Yeah. I mean, it's like, behind every, good man, there's a good woman, but it's like behind every good event is like a whole bunch of really bad ones. And that's what people don't understand. You have to like take your hits, man, and learn your lessons and just improve, right? Like it's not like the end of the road. You just got to be like, okay, well that didn't work so great. Let me try this. Let me adapt this, and it takes a while, But if you're providing value, then people come back, right? Even if they are the only one, they're like, okay, I see what's going on, right? And I want to be a part of this. This feels good. This is where I want to be, and I think that's has everything to do with you for sure. I mean, the group is only as good as its leader, even if you're just kind of setting this tone and backing out. You're still the one that like had that vision and conceptualized it and built the space for it, just even going back to the gratitude ceremony. I mean, that's an impressive room and an impressive stage to get on, but like you still created an environment where people felt safe and comfortable to go up there and get on that stage. And that's awesome. That's hard to do. Because especially when you're doing something that big, it's easy to be really stressed out. Like there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of liability involved. I'm sure, especially like we were just in the beginning of the pandemic. I'm sure that was on your mind this last one. Having to buy all that hand sanitizer and all those extra wipes, and like, there's just so much that goes, into it that, the average person who doesn't throw events just really doesn't understand. How many people are on your team? Like how many people actually produce Podfest Expo?
It's a small team. It's anywhere from 3 to 4 people. And then when we get to the event, this, you got to scale your team up. So then you'll have a
Right.
crew of 40 volunteers. Of the volunteers, you're going to have 10 people that what you consider your core. So you pay for their hotel rooms because you have to budget everything out because your expenses for an event could scale out of control extremely quickly because hotels, they charge a lot for a lot of different
For
reasons, a lot of different
everything.
things,
Yeah.
everything. So unfortunately you'd love to like take care of all your volunteers, but if you're trying to budget and do the best you can. So some volunteers, you comp them a ticket, you say, hey, I need you to work half the event, the other half is yours. And then you have your core people that have proven that they're there, like they enjoy. There's people that just enjoy like being of service, and that's how. So that you got to take care of them. So there's about 40 volunteers. It's going to have to grow next year, but 40 volunteers. You have your core team of 3 or 4, and then we'll hire like 5 to 7 event planners additional to help on site for the event. But throughout the year, it's a small crew. We're hoping for it to get bigger as our challenge is we have the audience. This, like we have the people that I consider the independents and the voices that make up the medium of podcasting. We have that audience. It's
Mhm.
the sponsors. We have some sponsors, but we don't really have what some other groups have, like major sponsors that are stroking big checks. So I'm very blessed. I'm not complaining, but I'm just saying that limits like what we can do. So I invest very heavily in putting everything out there, and then hopefully, like you said, the last couple of weeks is when my profit comes in from the last few sales of tickets. So it's a nerve-wracking event because you don't until you're like, depending on who you are, like me, about 30 days out, we should reach break even or a little before that. And then this past year, we were doing really well. But then with coronavirus, people were refunding as fast as we were going towards the event because when you get close to the event, you're not supposed to give refunds. My
Right.
thing though is if your airport just shut down and you can't come into the country, what is that person gonna do? So you gotta also have like some fairness. So we were able to make it through, but it did impact us. Luckily, it didn't impact us that bad. Like it could have been a lot worse. So
Mm-hmm.
we're really grateful, but it's not easy. What I do is for a living. There's a reason why there's not like a full-time promoter checkbox when you look for occupations. I never seen promoter because it's so rare. It's like people can't even. When someone thinks of a promoter, they think of like, depending on your age, you'll think Don King. All right,
Right.
now like a Dana White, like a fight promoter is who comes up in your head. When it comes to what we do, Molly, you'll have a club promoter that comes up too. But when it comes to like these events, they're all association led almost always or
Totally.
nonprofit. There's a nonprofit group because it's just too risky for any one individual. But I'm passionate about it. I love it. I told someone, like, we're about to, I believe we're about to really grow into some rarefied air, and that's phenomenal. But
Hmm.
someone's like, oh man, you should do this or that. I'm like, dude, I found what I love to do, and now I'm doing it. I'm not going anywhere for a while. Like, to love what you do and then actually actively do it is such a rare thing. Like, why would I go anywhere because of money or something? Like, for me, it's like just enjoy it and help people, because we get to help people 24/7. Before this call, some guy showed up at Podfest and he had a hiking podcast. Met my wife. She connected him to me. And sometimes all they need, and you know this, when you deal with creatives, is just some encouragement that they're doing a good job. Like, they don't hear from anybody. They're siloed in their house.
Exactly. And your friends and family are always the least supportive of your podcast journey. So you really need some
Yeah.
outside people.
Why are you doing that?
Yeah, they're
What
like,
is that?
yeah, you have a podcast, huh? It's like, shut up, man. Yeah. Well, so speaking of which, where do you think the industry is headed? I mean, it seems like, Podcast Business Journal just put out that article saying podcasting is pandemic proof. And, we're certainly seeing Spotify is still buying companies, still spending hundreds of millions of dollars in the midst of a pandemic, a cash deal, the last one. And so, where do you think, do you think podcasting is increasing? Are you seeing like an uptick, in the industry right now, or what are your thoughts there?
Well, you know what's happening now is we're going from grassroots, which we've been for quite some time, and this last 12 months, especially this pandemic, you're seeing a lot of money flood the market. So the reason is the radio ad dollars are about to transfer over, and now
Mm-hmm.
business is paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
So we went from, when I first started, I think, like, they were tracking ad spend, but they weren't tracking it accurately because podcasting was so fraction. How do you know if, like, you and I might have had a podcast and we made a couple of dollars? They don't know how to track that. But back then, when they were tracking the biggest podcast, it was like 10 million a year was spent on advertising, and then
Right.
it was 25, then 50, then 100. Now this year, I believe I think it'll be the first year it'll crest over a billion. If not,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be next year for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But what that means now that we're at the billion mark in ad dollars spent, radio ad dollars, I believe, is somewhere in the 10 to 18 billion dollars. It's a lot. That money is now going to flood into podcasting. So they're all just positioning themselves to receive that ad revenue. So you're going to see a lot of podcasters make money. So I think that's a good thing. A lot of creatives should start looking at monetizing themselves. And my advice to a creative is, um, be careful of being exclusive with someone,
Mm-hmm.
because you're a free agent. Just like you see these professional ball players, they all say the same thing. This is a business. And don't be careful being too loyal to some brand, because as you grow, you might be able to stroke a better deal. So right now, just be nimble, deal with multiple players, see where the money is going, and just follow that. But we should see a lot more money trickle down, hopefully. And then Spotify, I believe, I don't know for sure, but I think they're going to play a much bigger role in podcasting next couple of years.
Yeah.
They're going to be like a Facebook, YouTube kind of
Yeah.
play, because their ad program is pretty robust to put ads on.
Yeah, that's going to be the move, right? Which would explain why they've spent, almost $1 billion on acquiring companies in the last like 20 months. It's kind of insane. And I saw an article this morning saying that some of the companies, I can't remember which ones, but like Ringer and Cadence 13 and another one that got bought by Spotify, they're unionizing and they're demanding like better pay and clear work hours. So it's kind of interesting, little trouble in paradise already, but I think it'll be good for the industry to kind of see what's going on and then take some of those lessons and protect themselves. And like you said, I think staying nimble is really good. I'm a big fan of relationships, right? I've been thinking a lot about this last week because I've been booking a lot of artists for this event in DC and just thinking about, some transactions are really positive and some are negative. And I realized I think what's missing from that is, the recognition of the relationship, right? It's not a transaction, it's a relationship, right? And so I think like, understanding who your potential sponsors are, knowing where that money is, knowing what they want, knowing how to appeal to them, and then providing like the other half of that relationship, which is a give and a take. And that's really like how you grow and how you build. But I like the idea of not going all in on just one person because you could close the door, and miss some real opportunities for yourself, for sure.
Yeah, and so that's my advice to the independents is just be careful when you're brokering deals with people, especially if you start getting some downloads, they're giving you some attention. Well, there's a reason for it, so there's going to be other opportunities around the corner. So just be careful to lock yourself into one option.
Exactly. What is the number one question you get from podcasters?
Well, from podcasters that are active, always like, how do I make more? I want to make money, or how do I grow? Audience growth and making more money is always like, how do I monetize? I started a year ago, or
A week ago.
when did you start? Yeah, last week. How do I make money? So, Kate and I have been doing this for a long time now, almost a decade. And yeah, we make money, but it took years. Took. I'm not saying that should be everybody's experience. It's just like you got to earn your stripes too. So you got to just you should try and make money, but if you don't have an audience yet, unless you have a super niche. So I did help someone recently. Here's one that kind of is what do you call the one that bucks the trend. The guy happened to be very well placed in the produce industry. He's a
Mm-hmm.
produce broker, and he started the produce industry podcast. So I said, hey, you should start the produce industry podcast. And he's like, think so? I go, yeah, you represent the industry. Like, who don't have to get it certified? Yeah, on Apple. You don't need, there's no, you know how it works. So he goes, okay. And then he started putting out ad decks and he's got sponsors. But that was an industry that was waiting for a voice. So when you have that, you could definitely monetize. It doesn't matter on numbers. Those are but if you're on a general topic and there's a million people talking about the same topic and
Right.
you got 10 listeners, why would I advertise? You have to ask yourself, why would someone advertise with you when they have money? They'll advertise with the person with 20, 30,000 listeners because they can get more out of it. So I would just tell people research, do the work. But a lot of times for those of us in the industry, when someone asks about monetization, that's all they're worried about. You realize that they might not be as worried about their audience and they might be doing it for other reasons. And they put a lot of stress on themselves. I would just say, I have a lot of podcasts I've done that I don't really talk about because I did it for fun. I didn't care about
Yeah.
monetization. I just love what it can do. So just focus on your art and definitely learn how to monetize, but know that there's a time and place sometimes, and you got to put in your time before it could come out the other end.
For sure. I do a lot of work with businesses and brands, like more branded podcasts, and I do like solo podcasts. And so I actually don't get that question a lot because they know they're going to monetize the podcast by getting new clients. And so they're not as pressed, right? And they could get 50 listens on that podcast, but they just need the right three people to hear it, and that turns into a engagement, and that pays for it. So they're a little bit less kind of pushing that track down the road. But so in where do you see yourself in 5 years? Right, like everything's gone great. What does that look like for you?
Well, for me, spending a lot of time with my daughters, that's the key. Like, I love doing that time at 5 p.m., whatever, home at night. The cool thing about Podfest happens once a year. So then I get to travel to a couple events, but for the most part, I'm home and I get to go home with the little ones. So that's like number one. And by then they'll be little ladies. So they'll be sad and happy, right? Different phase. Um, Podfest will be a lot bigger. So our job is to create more verticals. And what I mean by that, for the different niches within podcasting, so we can represent the whole category, so to speak. Um, I mean, I believe Podfest will become a citywide event where we take up the entire city of Orlando. And we're actually looking at how the hotels go into the Orange County Convention Center. So I think what we did right, and Molly, you mentioned this earlier, we built the culture. And we built a culture of inclusiveness, of non-judgment, of people kind of wanting to help each other. And that's really important. So that took us years to set the foundation for that. Now we have the word is getting out fast, but it didn't happen that way. As you know, it was a small little boulder, but now the momentum has really helped us. So we believe that will be a huge event.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at that as a privilege that these individuals empower this event, and that allows me to do what I do. So then I take it very seriously to take a percentage of those profits and figure out where I could invest them for the medium of podcasting to grow, for people who have a voice to find the medium, like you said, whether it's podcasting or YouTube, because we are doing a lot with VidFest and we're going to be growing that. So you're going to
Yeah.
see a lot of that. We want to bring in blockchain technologies in as well, because we believe that's also a revolutionary thing. So we
Mm-hmm.
believe Podfest and the group of events we have represent the future, like the tech, and how we communicate. So we want to wrap a lot of that in for these influencers. So as long as it's challenging, which with growth, as you know, it will be challenging every year. I'm in. Once it's the same thing every year, I'm out. So for me, as long as it's growing and I could add value, it's great. Like I love it. So I don't see that stopping anytime soon. So that's what I'll be doing more than likely the next 5 years.
That's awesome. I wanted to share a story with you. So when I was at Podfest in March, I was in this one particular room, and they had everybody pass the microphone around to just everybody in the room to introduce themselves. And it went around the room, and it was funny because people had like hand sanitizers, so we were all like kind of weirded out, but we made it work. And this one lady was like, I know this is a lot to share, but my father passed away while I was on the flight coming here. So when
Oh,
I got off the plane and turned my phone on, that was the news I got. And it was so powerful, Chris. I might cry a little bit, but I'll try to hide it. But like everybody in the room was just sent her so much love. Like nobody made her feel uncomfortable. Like it was just handled in the best way possible. And we just let her talk. And she's like, I knew it was coming, but it was just a lot. And I just wanted to share that. And then people were so nice. And so when she left the room, I kind of like ran out afterwards and I was like, can I give you a hug? Like, is that okay? And I just like held her for a minute because I want to share oxytocin. That's my jam. Like, I think on Facebook it even says like long hugger. Like, that's my, I want to feel a little woozy afterwards. And so I gave her a hug and I just kind of listened and I just created some space for her to just like share what she needed to share. So fast forward 2 days later, I'm in the little VIP speakers room, and I'm taking the stage in 15 minutes for my presentation. And I look down at my phone, and somebody who I really care about died.
mm,
A man named Sam Burns. He was a legend in DC, and he was really good, man. He was a good friend of mine. And I mean, I'm supposed to get on the stage in 15 minutes. I'm just like, oh man, I gotta just like put this aside for a minute. But like, I'm trying not to lose it. And I'm sitting there and I'm just in my silence for a moment. I get up and I walk out the door. And who's the first person I see? That same woman. And she goes, hey, how are you? I just wanted to thank you. And she goes, are you okay? And I said, you're not going to believe this. Like, someone who was like a
wow.
father to me just died. And then she held me and like created some space for me. And I just thought, like, like how many people were there? 3,000 people. I mean, and that's the culture, that's the community that like you've created. Like that wasn't an accident. Like I needed her in that exact moment because I had to go get on stage. And I knew that if I was like, I just found out my friend died, I was going to cry. And then that would have been really awkward. So I was like, I just got to get through this. It's just like, that was so special, man. Like, I can't even put into words, like, I didn't feel alone there, and neither did she. And that's because of the environment that you created. And so I don't know if you had heard that story or not before,
No,
but
that's an amazing story. I heard that someone had lost their father. I didn't hear the full circle of how you and now the two of you connected, and then the favor got repaid
isn't,
the 2 days later.
isn't that crazy? Just like,
Oh man, that's deep. You got me going. That's
and then I went to dinner with some people later on that night, and um I'm talking to this girl and she says, yeah, I have a podcast that's about loss. It's about death and loss. And I said, oh, that's so ironic because I just lost somebody earlier today and I almost didn't come to this dinner, but I knew if I didn't come to the dinner, I would just be in the room crying, drinking my like
uh,
canned wine. And she
uh,
goes, oh, wait a minute. I heard about you. I said, what? And she said, yeah, I met the lady whose dad died and she told me about you. I was like, this is so weird because that was at a dinner offsite, not even on the property, through other people. So yeah, it was just like, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And that'll never leave, like that feeling, you know what I mean? Like you've got me, man, like however I can help with whatever you're doing, like, because that's what it's all about, right? It's people. At the end of the day, it's people. It's always people. you know?
You know you probably remember this, but the story at the gratitude ceremony that sticks out for me. What you just told me, I'll remember forever. Like that's amazing. I'm gonna share it with Katie when I get home today. The story that sticks out was Maxwell Ivy, the blind blogger, pops up
Mm-hmm.
on stage, and we give everybody a treasure map to go fill out at the whatever you call it, the vendors. You know, if you fill out your treasure map at the
Right.
vendors, you win a prize. And you forget that he's blind. So how's he going to fill out a treasure map? He can't see the map, and he can't see where he's going, like unless someone helps him, and he doesn't see where all the vendors are. And Maxwell became blind in his early 20s, so he's not as intuitive as some people. Like we had another gentleman, David Goldstein, is very intuitive. He gets around like so. Believe it or not, David Goldstein was leading Maxwell Ivy around the hotel, and they were roommates, which is amazing, right? So he gets up there and he goes, I got this treasure map. I wanted to fill it out, but I can't see anything and I don't know where the vendors are. He goes, but Chris has always said that this community is going to take care of me. So on faith, he shows up in the exhibit hall, and then the exhibitors would say, Max, do you need help? He goes, yeah. So then every exhibitor took him hand by hand down to the next exhibitor, and he got his treasure map filled out.
That's so
And
cool.
that's amazing. Like he wound up completing his map because every exhibitor helped him get to the next person. They'd watch over him, and then they would tell, hey, make sure he gets to the next person, and they made sure he got his map filled out. To me, that's like, I wish I had that map. I would have framed it. I don't know where we put it, but
Totally.
yeah, that's like one of those stories. And what you just told me, like that's what makes it special. And I you know, not nothing with corporate, but what happens is when something gets really big in corporate, it gets what I call desanitized.
Hmm.
And you know, events, there's some ugliness to it, but there's some beauty, and when you let the beauty
Yeah.
unravel, it overtakes everything. And I think that's my job, is to make sure that we could just let the beauty unravel and let it flow. And when it does, story like the story you just told me is amazing. I had no idea that happened.
Like, what are the odds? You know what I mean? Like, what are the odds at that exact moment? And just,
Those, just so you know, we have to collect those stories because there's a lot of them. And during the strategic alliance, some lady is like, I don't have a computer. Some guy got up off his chair, took a computer out of his thing. He's like, I was going to sell it, but I need to give it away anyways. You could have my computer, and gave her a computer right then and there, in the middle of her saying, I need a computer to podcast this. So it was like, what? And I said to him, why'd you do that? He goes, actually, I was going to sell it. And she was, I had it on me. Might as well just give it to her. What am I going to make? He goes, couple dollars. I don't need it. She
and then,
needs it. Let her
right, then
have
he
it.
has
I
to
was
go
like,
mail it and everything.
yeah, yeah, mail. He's like, I don't need it. It's a pain in the ass. Anyways, she could have it.
Well, and but that's the community, that's the, environment where it's like you see people helping and you want to help too, and you want to be that person. And I just think, I think right now, Chris, that matters so much more than anything else. Like we're seeing so much ugliness in the world and on social media, and just like, it's really hard, right? And so like those moments of like camaraderie and community and like just being welcome and hugging a stranger in the middle of a pandemic who's like sharing that pain with you, like, that really meant something, and like that's the takeaway, right? Like instead of just being like, oh, I went to this podcast convention and Sam died in the middle of it and it was ruined. It was like, no, I like was able to share some of that pain. And
Well,
uh
you have a lot of people that love you. I don't know if you know this, but I always, when I say, hey, you should check out. A lot of people don't know I know you, right? So because we all know each other, but it's a big conference, so they don't realize, like, does Chris know Molly, whatever, and they'll say, hey, you got a real ass kicker in blah 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 room. I go, what's the name? And they go, Molly. I go, Molly Rule. And they go, yeah, yeah. And they go, you know her? I go, of course. Well, how do you think like all the speakers show? Molly's an ass kicker. I saw her out in DC, and I go, but I hear it all the time. They're like, man, she's a real ass kicker. I love her presentation. And your style flows very well with our culture and community, which is like, here's what it is, whether you like it or not. I'm going to teach you what I got. And then you got to go do something with it. And it's just, I can't tell you how many compliments I get about, there's people that really love your style and they always mention you. So I always smile when that happens because I know who they're talking about almost before they're about to say
you're like, was she cursing a lot? That was probably
it.
Molly.
was there
Yeah.
was there a couple of bombs there? They go, yeah. I go, yeah, it's Molly.
Well, it's like I'm balancing between like public speaking and stand up comedy, right? Like it's like one foot in the
No, you
door.
do a
So,
great balance. You never, it is. This is what I tell people, because to you, it's natural to you. I always tell people, if you're not a natural cursor, don't go out of your way. Like it's got to be genuine to the character. I'm okay with that. But if someone wants to just do it because they want to shock everybody, that's
Right.
not cool. Like a Gary Vee is a Gary Vee. You can't duplicate his style. Your style is your style. So it's
Exactly. Well, I always
it's
appreciate
awesome.
being included and everything else. So, awesome. Well, dude, it's really great, to chat with you. It's funny because like this podcast is kind of for fun and it's just for like passion, but most importantly, honestly, like I've been a little lonely during this pandemic. Like I've been by myself, right? Like moving around. I've been living at the beach and like I've been in really pretty places. I'm in Boston right now, but like at the same time, it's lonely, man. It's hard. And I was like, I want to connect with people, right? So, like, I don't care how many downloads this gets. Like, it's more just about having this conversation with you, getting to share that story, introducing my audience to the stuff that you're doing and the events coming up, and just sharing some humanity, right? And having a good conversation. I think that's really the core of it all. So thank you for taking time to come on the show.
No, Molly, no, thank you for asking. And the advice I'd give anyone listening to this is think of some of your strongest friends out there. And if you haven't talked to them in a while, give them a call, tell them, see how they're
Yeah.
doing, and just listen. And if you hear in their voice that they're trying to pretend like that things are going great, but they're hurting, call them again. And then just keep calling them till, you break through. So right now, that's why I'm doing these virtual summits, Molly. People are like, oh, it's a great business strategy. Like, no, man, I went through my ups and downs. I can't imagine what other people are going through. If we could all just get together and help each other, it felt like I felt great during. It's a lot of work, but what the heck, like it felt great to see everybody. And now we're doing it again. We're gonna do it a couple more times just to see everybody and talk to everybody. It just feels good. So
It
it's
is
the
good.
best getting everybody together.
And you never know what that means. Like you said, you never know what that means for somebody, especially the strongest people, because they're the ones that get like,
They're the ones that suffer silently, and they don't want to lean on anyone or burden anyone. So anytime you need me, you know where to find me, Molly. And I love you. I think you're amazing. The first time I saw you speak, I was like, man, she's awesome. And just keep up what you're doing. You're helping a lot of people rethink about themselves and the opportunities in front of them. I remember you were telling people they should be their own media company. I couldn't agree with you more. But the problem is not everybody sees that opportunity. So your job is you make them see what's in front of them and realize how amazing that opportunity is. So
that's
keep
right.
lighting up as many people as you can.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Awesome. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. So, thank you very much. And thank you for tuning into the Lower Third podcast. I hope you found this conversation helpful. Go check out Podfest Expo. All the links are below in the description. Sign up for the virtual stuff. Go to Podfest Expo next year. I'll be there no matter where it is or wherever it is. I'm going to be there. And show some love to your local podcasters, right? Like, radio is cool and all, but podcasters are with you everywhere you go. So maybe next time you're in the shower or cooking dinner or on your bike or going for that walk, listen to a podcast, show some love to somebody who has a voice and has that platform and they're doing it for you. So thank you all, and we'll see you on the next episode.